U.S. Senator Chris Van Hollen met yesterday with a man illegally deported to El Salvador by the Trump administration. And the son of a sheriff's deputy is the suspect in yesterday's deadly mass shooting at Florida State University. Good morning. I'm Corva Coleman from NPR News, and here are today's top stories. U.S. Senator Chris Van Hollen held a face-to-face meeting with Abrego Garcia. He's the man illegally deported to a mega prison in El Salvador by the Trump administration. NPR's Ryland Barton reports the Maryland Democratic senator was initially turned away by Salvadoran officials.
In an interview yesterday on All Things Considered, Van Hollen said soldiers had initially prevented him from reaching the prison.
They simply said they had been given orders not to allow me to visit him.
Later in the day, the president of El Salvador, Nayib Bukele, posted on X that Van Hollen had met with Abrego Garcia and said that he, quote, gets the honor of staying in El Salvador's custody. The senator then posted a picture of himself and Abrego Garcia sitting at a table. Also yesterday, a federal appeals court declined the Trump administration's request to lift a judge's order that they help bring Abrego Garcia back to the U.S. Ryland Barton, NPR News.
A vigil will be held today on the Florida State University campus in Tallahassee for the victims of yesterday's mass shooting. NPR's Greg Allen reports the 20-year-old suspect arrested by police is the son of a sheriff's deputy.
Police say Phoenix Eichner used his mother's handgun to shoot 8 people, killing 2. Leon County Sheriff said he'd been a member of the department's Youth Advisory Board and had gone through extensive training with the department. The shootings occurred near Florida State University's Student Union building. Students locked themselves in basements and bathrooms while they heard gunshots being fired outside. Eichner didn't surrender when confronted by police and was shot and wounded before being arrested. Classes at FSU are canceled today, as are home athletic events through the weekend. Greg Allen, NPR News.
Economists and central bankers are defending Federal Reserve Chair Jerome Powell against pressure from President Trump. NPR's Scott Horsley reports Trump is unhappy with the Fed chair for not lowering interest rates.
President Trump told reporters that Powell is going to have a lot of political pressure to cut borrowing costs, even though the Fed is designed to be insulated from politics. Trump said on social media this week that Powell's termination, quote, cannot come fast enough. Chief economist Mark Zandi of Moody's Analytics told the Economic Club of New York investors would react poorly if Powell were forced out.
I think that would be devastating if he's not able to remain in place until his term is over. I think that would be highly counterproductive and lead to, more turmoil in financial markets and ultimately a much weaker economy.
Powell insists he plans to serve out his term as Fed chair, which runs through May of next year. Scott Horsley, NPR News, Washington.
Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelenskyy says there is evidence China is supplying Russia with artillery and gunpowder. NPR's Joanna Kakissis reports from Kyiv Zelenskyy did not elaborate on this evidence, while China says the charge is baseless.
Chinese Foreign Ministry spokesperson Lin Chan said Beijing has not sent weapons or ammunition to either Russia or Ukraine during the war that China calls a crisis. Speaking to reporters in Kyiv on Thursday, Zelenskyy said Ukraine's intelligence has documented such shipments from China to Russia and said he wasn't surprised. Zelenskyy said Chinese leader Xi Jinping promised earlier in the war that he would not sell or send weapons to Russia. Unfortunately, now we see information to the contrary. Zelenskyy said he would provide more information about these shipments sometime next week. Ukraine has also captured 2 Chinese nationals fighting for Russia. Joanna Kakissis, NPR News, Kyiv.
A day after European and American officials reported progress in a new effort to end the war in Ukraine, Secretary of State Marco Rubio has tamped down expectations. Rubio spoke as he left Paris. NPR's Eleanor Beardsley reports these were the highest-level U.S.-European talks on the conflict since February.
After making zero progress in its go-it-alone approach with Russian President Vladimir Putin, the Trump administration seemed ready to try to work with the Europeans. Secretary of State Marco Rubio and White House envoys Steve Witkoff and Keith Kellogg sat down with German, British, and Ukrainian diplomats Thursday. The Europeans pushed the Americans to take a tougher line with Russia, but Rubio made it clear that President Trump might not even stick around.
We need to figure out here now within a matter of days whether this is doable, because if it's not, if we're so far apart that this is not going to happen, then I think the president's probably at a point where he's going to say, well, we're done.
European leaders say they will never abandon Ukraine, as its survival is also key to European security. Eleanor Beardsley, NPR News, Paris.
Every year, the U.S. State Department releases human rights reports on every country around the world. NPR's Graham Smith tells us that this year there are major changes coming in these reports.
Internal State Department documents reviewed by NPR show the Trump administration is dropping multiple categories of human rights abuses from its annual country reports. No longer will the U.S. call out governments for violations against the freedom to privacy, the right to free and fair elections, or the right to peacefully assemble. More than 20 kinds of violations are being stripped out, according to these documents, to comply with recently issued executive orders from the White House. Among them, violence against minorities and disabled people, and serious government corruption. Human rights defenders tell NPR they're concerned the U.S. is abandoning its post as a supporter of personal freedoms, and that this will send the wrong message to authoritarian governments. Graham Smith, NPR News.
A federal grand jury has indicted the man accused of killing United Healthcare's CEO Brian Thompson last December. One of the 4 counts could make Luigi Mangione eligible for the federal death penalty if he is convicted. Mangione already faces murder and terrorism charges in New York State. U.S. Attorney General Pam Bondi says President Trump has directed her agency to seek the federal death penalty when possible. The Trump administration's sweeping staffing cuts at federal lands agencies are causing anxiety across the tinder-dry Southwest. NPR's Kirk Siegler reports the wildfire threat is already severe.
The Trump administration says wildland firefighters continue to be exempt from the federal hiring freeze, but an untold number of Forest Service staffers who hold red cards, meaning they can leave their day jobs to fight fires, were laid off in February. One of them in New Mexico is Kayla, whose full name we aren't using because she fears retaliation.
Yeah, I just feel like if it's a ticking time bomb, I feel like we were doing everything in our power to help prevent the catastrophic fires.
She recently got her job back after a court ruling, but says Forest Service staff are, quote, walking on eggshells, and all the work that goes into protecting communities and wildlife from wildfires is on hold. Kirk Siegler, NPR News, Santa Fe.
President Trump has congratulated Texas lawmakers for moving forward on a bill that Republicans say is about offering parents school choices. From the Texas newsroom, Blaise Gainey has more.
The Education Savings Program allows Texas families to use taxpayer dollars to send their kids to private schools. The voucher program prioritizes students with disabilities and low-income families. Democrat John Busey opposed parts of the measure and tried to amend it.
I'm not saying get rid of all the prioritization buckets. I'm talking about those over 500% of the federal poverty level. Gotcha. Families making $160,000.
The attempt failed. Now, with both chambers having the votes, it's likely the bill will become law. If it passes, Texas' program will be one of the largest school voucher rollouts in the nation, starting at $1 billion. Some parents of children with disabilities worry because private schools aren't required to provide the same federal legal protections for students with disabilities. I'm Blaise Gainey in Austin.
You're listening to NPR News.